Everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for attending our first legislative breakfast that's sponsored by the Grange and Addison County Farm Bureau. The way the program works, so we enjoy breakfast at 7:30 we start our program, and we run until 8:45. You're welcome to mingle and talk amongst yourselves after that time. That's the time we allot for our representatives and senators to have discussions. So guests will have 2 minutes to ask a question or to make comments, and then these questions can be directed at large or specifically to a topic or a certain legislature. Then all of the legislators will have up to 3 minutes as a response to each question if they wish. Once they finish, we'll ask if anyone else would like to follow up on that issue before we move on to the next one. Also feel free, we have a smaller crowd this morning. This is microphone works, and so does that one over there. It just amplifies it for like the video and for everyone else in the room. So feel free to step up to the microphone when you have your comments. We will cut off if we have like a hot topic in it. We'll try to not have a topic exceed more than 20 minutes. That's just our general rule. So we can talk about everyone's concerns, hopefully, in the time frame that we have. So I will start by letting the legislators introduce themselves. Senator Bray, if you'd like to come up and...
Sure.
Seems how you know the ropes pretty well.
I've had a little practice.
Thank you, Joe. Beth, and thanks to Farm Bureau. It's great to be back. I don't exactly keep track, but this is like my 164th legislative breakfast or something like that. I've always liked going, and I appreciate that we have a chance to move around the county and see people and hear what's on their minds. Especially because during the legislative session, I'm Monday through Friday, I stay in Montpelier. I go over and rent a room over there so I can get my homework done every night. It would be too much time just back and forth in the car. So my name's Chris Bray. I live in Bristol. I serve in the Senate. I was in the House from 07 to 11. Stepped out and came back on the Senate side. I chair in the morning the Natural Resources and Energy Committee, which this is my 10th year doing that, and my afternoon committee is the Finance Committee, which deals with taxes, utilities, banking, insurance, things like that. And I guess I'll leave it at that to get started. I think I've finished thinking about it.
Yeah, feel free to pull the chair.
Good morning, my name is Peter Conlon. I'm in the House. I represent Cornwall, Goshen, Leicester, Salisbury, and Ripon. I live in Cornwall, and I am the chair of the House Education Committee, and I'm in my 8th year in the House. That's about it. Thank you.
All right, so we will open up the floor to our first question or comment. If anybody wants to be brave enough. Or is there a topic that either of you feel like you want to elaborate on that you guys have in your committees?
Sure, I'll open up.
Yeah. And if you want to just state your name and where you're from.
I'm Bob Warren, I'm from Shoreham. I'm interested in the state property tax for education. I don't know where you legislators are standing, but as a 73-year-old resident of this state, the taxes are just getting too much. And I don't know how you guys are gonna fix it, but you need to fix it right off.
Thanks. I'll answer from the House education point of view, and Chris is on finance, which sort of does the taxing point of view. So this year, education taxes are a major topic that is largely driven by two factors. One, we're seeing an unprecedented increase in education spending, really to the tune of $250 million this year in the budgets that are proposed across the state. So $250 million translates roughly statewide to about a 25-cent tax increase in your property taxes. About a penny on the property tax rate raises about $10 million. 25 cents raises $250 million. And that's roughly how much is being proposed in the budgets out there. At the same time this year, we have the implementation of Act 127, which is designed to take the money we raise for education and allocate it to schools on a more equitable basis. In other words, if you have a school that has a high number of students who need English language services, or you have a high poverty rate that has a direct correlation to higher needs of students, your taxing capacity, your sort of share of the state education fund relative to your taxes is a little more than a district that might not have all of those factors. Part of that law was to create kind of a transition mechanism for schools who were going to lose a lot of taxing capacity as a result of the law. They would have capped their tax rate increases at 5%. This law was developed back when budgets were going up 3 and 4%, healthcare was under control, tax rates were going up 3 and 4%, contracts for teachers and staff at schools in those multi-year contracts that we get were coming in at 3 and 4%. But that's now sort of a little bit out the window. Healthcare is up 16%. Inflation alone is up. The number of students being identified on special education is up. There's just a lot of increases at the same time that we see all of the federal dollars that came in during COVID coming to an end. So all of these factors have kind of come together at the same time, and so that this 5% cap that we put in to help those districts that were losing tax capacity transition, everybody hit the cap. And so in the complex world of the way the education fund works, it's a self-sustaining fund. In other words, as costs go up, taxes go up. Or if there's some place that is not generating enough money in the education fund, you have to work on another place to generate the money. So anyway, it's one of these things where if everybody hits a protective cap, the cap becomes meaningless. And so tax rates were kind of going a little bit crazy everywhere. So what has happened this year is we've had to remove the cap. You're probably hearing a lot about this. It hasn't actually happened yet. And allow districts to rewarn their budgets. This is really for 2 reasons. One, to sort of be able to return to that relationship between cutting your budget and taxes going down. If this cap had stayed in, and we had town meeting day and 80% of the budgets across the state failed, which was not an unrealistic potential, school boards would go back and they might cut their budget, but it really wouldn't make a difference because there's still this math that goes on with everybody hitting a cap, and the difference between that cap and where they're actually spending still has to be funded. So there's a lot going on right now, a lot you're hearing about with this. The idea of allowing districts to reopen their budget was because some said, wow, with this cap, we can actually spend more money but not have it affect taxes. And if everybody's doing that, which is the case, the math falls apart. So the idea here is to also give districts the opportunity to go back, rewarn their budgets. If they had added sort of like one-time costs that can be deferred, then it needs to happen. And if we can sort of reduce that $250 million number of excess spending and get it down statewide by maybe $50 million, it will make a significant difference in tax rates. As to the bigger question of why does education cost so much, there's a lot of reasons. We operate a very expensive education system in Vermont. It's why our property taxes are high, and property taxes are by and large not the only thing that funds education. We've got sales taxes, rooms and meals taxes, non-homestead property taxes. But we have hit an inflection point, a critical crossroads where we need to stop and say, why is our education system in Vermont so expensive, and what can we do about it? Now, pastime. All right, this is good. I'll allow the senator from the finance committee to continue, and I'm happy to talk more about this afterward.
Thank you, Representative Collins. So, Peter is one of the great things about having him here is that he knows a lot about what's going on in schools and it's driving these costs. So, $250 million is a huge increase. It's the biggest thing that we spend money on. I think the total education spend is about 1.4 billion.
2.3 billion.
Oh, 2.3, sorry. I'm very old fashioned. I thought we were still in the ones. So 2.3, it's out of a $8.4 billion budget, so a very large portion of spending. So on the finance side of things, the way our committee will be charged in the end, partnering with the House Ways and Means Committee, that's the House Tax Committee, and I'm on the Senate Tax Committee, with raising the money necessary to raise the money that all school districts will pass budgets. The total of all those budgets will be added up, and then the legislature's task is to find the money to fund all those programs. We don't write the budgets, as you know, all the school budgets are local. So one of the things, it's pretty natural, I think, to see Peter and me here and think, well, what are you going to do about it? We are limited to a certain degree. By that I mean the legislature responds by finding the money to fund all the budgets that passed at the local level. So how much the total is comes down to school budget by school budget all over the state, and we never know that number until after town meeting. But there is an estimate that comes out in the fall and into the beginning of the legislative session, and we could see $250 million more spending. That's a lot of additional spending at a time where we have a declining number of students. So the really big question is the one that Peter touched on at the very end there, like, why do we have the most expensive one? I don't know if we are number one in the country.
Number one.
Yeah. The other thing, the other thing that goes, I just want to pause because I feel the frustration, as do you. Like, I think we all are civic-minded. We know that a right to an education, public education, is in our Vermont Constitution. It's that simple, basic thing. We want people to have a good education, become informed citizens, become informed voters, and help run the joint. We all run the joint together. So it's an important piece of our state approach to supporting the next generation. But the one quick thing I want to say is that we lump into the education budget. There is spending that's related to health care. We deliver a lot of public service to not only students, but students and their families through the venue known as a school. So you can imagine there are kids that are in counseling in school, but sometimes that counseling even includes bringing their families in. So there's a lot more that goes on in the school budget than just the reading, writing, and arithmetic stuff that I think we all grew up and expected. We also do a lot with food and nutrition and health. There are a lot of kids in the state that the school meal is an important part of their nutrition every day. So I'll stop there.
Do we have more comments or questions on this topic? Feel free to.
Hi, Karen DeGay. One of my questions, Peter, is this idea of school consolidation. Is that a path forward in terms of making our state a little bit more affordable, or do you not see it? Is it more of a drop in the bucket situation?
So I would say that, but I would say we were at kind of a crossroads here. We're at a crossroads where we need to really think big and think about how we can cut down the cost of education in Vermont and still keep it effective. So I would say that everything's on the table, but we have, as Chris was saying, we have this tension. We have a state-funded system. In other words, the state raises the money to fund our school systems, and the state really has little control over the decisions that are made at the local level. So, we have to figure out a way to thread that needle between what the voters have basically said that they want when it comes to consolidation, which is none, and how you can reduce the cost per pupil in the state. The fact is that maintaining so many buildings and staffing so many buildings is expensive. And is there a way to address that? So I was the chair of the ACSD board for several years, and before that the high school board before we consolidated. This is a very difficult topic. But one thing I did learn is that you got to give folks something to vote for rather than vote against. So one of the other areas that we're working very hard in is to try to create a school construction aid program so that we can start chipping away at some of the incredible deferred maintenance of school buildings out there. We used to have a state aid program that provided 30% of these projects, but it went away about the same time as the Great Recession because it got oversubscribed and the state's bonding capacity kind of reached an end. We're going to try to get that going again. We have about $6 billion in deferred maintenance at our schools, and we could spend $200 million a year for the next 20 years to sort of get us back to safe and warm school buildings with no sort of innovation. So we're going to try to create a program that incentivizes some of those strategies that could help folks. I think it's a lot easier for folks to think about consolidating schools if they can look forward to maybe a bright, shiny, new 21st century learning center to replace that. I remember back years ago, the state had a program where if you consolidated 2 or 3 schools into one, you got 50% state aid, which was huge. And Leicester, Sudbury, and Whiting all were operating very small elementary schools at the time, and they attempted that. But even with a 50% incentive to build a nice school, it ended up not passing muster with the voters. So that's really one of the main areas that we are trying to figure out how to best incentivize and respond to what folks want. Thanks.
And along those same lines, the reimagining what a campus can be, I think, is part of what's going on. What do I mean by that? So in Bristol, we've had roughly a $34 million bond vote up maybe 5 times that failed to renovate Mount Aid. So clearly, voters are saying, we don't think it's worth it to make this investment in this facility the way it's operating. And I've had conversations with people and said, well, what might make that campus feel more valuable to the town and the towns around the 5 towns as a whole? And so some of the things are that we might be able to co-locate something like pre-K there, or you might have a senior center on that same facility. We've even talked about as much as, is there enough room on that campus that you might have senior housing so that it starts to become a multi-generational place that the community as a whole can use it more than even the kitchen there. So one of the things we've worked on a lot in Addison County is value-added food. A lot of people have needed the capability of processing food for the marketplace. We've developed food hubs and commercial kitchens that people can use to do that processing. What if it turned out that kitchen as part of this campus was available part of the year for people who are part of that whole food movement? There's just a number of ways that it could become less about a campus just for the kids we think of now, middle and high school, and more of a campus for the community as a whole. And I don't know if that's the direction the town will end up going, but at least I hear people interested and it starts to feel more valuable to them.
John Ball from Addison. I'd like to suggest something, thinking out of the box on the education issue, and use the Willowell Foundation as a model for another education situation. And this doesn't cost anything, because I don't know if any of you in here know about Willowell Foundation, but the kids basically, their schoolroom is outdoors, all year round, all winter long. Our daughter graduated from Willowell a few years back. The education is great because now she's a managing director at Willowell. I'd suggest that this model be looked at because it could save a lot, and I think it also gives higher education standards. We have higher education standards there than from the schools themselves. It's worth looking into. By the way, it's Virgins. The school system is out of the Virgins High School.
I'm Jan Louise Ball, and I'm from Addison too, and I'd like to, are we still talking about schools, or can I move on to something else? I'll wait if you want me to wait.
Are there any more comments about education in schools?
In Whiting, we sold our school.
Can you just state your name?
Oh, Mike Bertrand, Whiting. We sold our school to the Rutland Northeast or Otter Valley for $2. Now they got well, what do you call it? Where they can take children, babysit them or whatever. Daycare center. That's fine, that's wonderful. But what upsets me is the average working woman cannot afford to take her child to that daycare center because she makes too much money. So the average working family is supporting this. And the children that are in there right now are for mothers that are getting some kind of time during the week, 8 hours a day, to sit at home and not watch their 3 kids. There's a lot of them in there right now that don't want to take care of their children, and that comes from the education funding. And you go by the place, there's probably 12 to 14 cars parked there every day, and that's being funded by the state education. Nobody looks into that. That's being funded by the average working woman and father who make too much money, they can't use it. So there's something there that's a little fishy that needs just looking into. I mean, I don't mean to be against people that don't want to work or nothing, but it's a little, when I see somebody else working and they can't afford it.
So my understanding is that the school in Whiting operates 2 things. One, a private child care center is allowed to operate there rent-free. I don't think that they limit who can go there except by the number of slots available. I don't think it has anything to do with income. And then they operate a public pre-K for 10 hours a week, which is in fact funded through the education fund. And that is open to any pre-K child in the Otter Valley District, 10 hours a week, no charge. It is like going to school. It is open to all students in that district at no charge, regardless of their parents' income. That's my understanding of what operates out of the Whiting Elementary School.
I'll say again, I know some actual people that can't afford to do it.
Probably the private,
That's right.
the private
They
child.
can't.
Yeah.
They cannot, and that's not fair to them. Because they are paying taxes every day and supporting. So some of this stuff we can't help. We don't do a very good job of looking over the situation. But I'm 70 years old, well, another 10 years. I guess it won't matter, but you better be looking at handing this money just, there you go, there you go. It's like my school in Otter Valley. You look at the buses, you're lucky if there's 15, 20 kids on a 65 passenger. Go look. I mean, that's sad when you hear they send 2 buses to a basketball game and the bus driver comes back with 1 student in his bus. You've already sent 2 up there. The parents brought them back. That's the kind of waste you've got in education right now. It's just fluent. And nobody thinks about it. As far as health insurance and stuff, all these people are working hard for their health insurance. A few years back, well, we got to put on the janitor and all the bus drivers onto the health insurance. There was one woman here who spoke up what it costs her a month for health insurance. It's outrageous. Nobody helps her out. But right off, the school wants something, teachers or whatever, oh yeah, we'll give it to them. Well, they should have their own 401k and all that, we all know that. We can't support that, that's going broke right now. And all you people both know that. It's not supporting itself. 401k for the teachers is not, well, the retirement in the state is not supporting itself. So that's coming out of your tax dollar. So when you think about retiring, you think about them. It's all hands up, give it to them. Well, we've got to stop that. I'm 70, I'm okay, I got enough to live on. But do you? That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Can I, just a little bit?
Yes.
So on retirement, I think it was during the Dean administration, it was a long time ago, that the state started not making its full contribution to the state pension program. And so we, both on the teacher side and on the state employee side, just like compound interest, you can get behind faster by having underfunded a program. So the legislature, since I've been in, we've always fully funded, but that was only keeping, the water right here. We weren't getting out of the water. In the last, I think it may be 7 years or so, Peter might have a clearer recollection, we've been, when we can, we've been making higher payments to try to draw that pension debt down. But you're right, having a retirement program for state employees and teachers is it's an expense. It's part of our contract with those workers, and so we have an obligation in the Finance Committee to be finding ways to fund all our obligations, our legal obligations. But I would agree, it adds, it's a big bill that we pay.
See, I work for a very large, Mike Bertrand again, a very large company, a very sustainable company. But the owner of that company said there's one thing that will be, all employees will have their own 401k plan. They will not invest in my company. Because if they do, they could lose everything. So what I did, I had to, go into a 401k plan. And that's proven very, very well for me. And they only put 3% in a year. But I'm all set. Now, why don't we just change this all for the new hirees and say this, have your own retirement plan and get whoever you want to run it. They supplied somebody, you could use them for nothing.
Sure.
That's what we gotta do in the state. We've got to stop this.
Well, I think,
I'm just a little guy in 26 years.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you're working for an employer that has a program. There are plenty of smaller employers that feel like they have a choice. They're stuck. If they're going to pay a wage that attracts and holds workers, they don't have enough then to go on and provide this kind of solid benefits program that once was more common, especially with bigger employers.
No, excuse me, because you can get your own person, handle your retirement very easily. A group of 5 people can.
Sure.
Amia just did that to set it up so get you started. Eventually, I left and went to somebody else besides the ones they provided.
Right.
But this is foolish. We can't keep, if you don't invest right, you're never gonna catch up on this little deal.
Sure.
And something's gotta be put in place so people can have their choices where they wanna invest in and retire, not in the state of Vermont's taxpayer.
Okay. I'm just talking about the opportunities for the obligations we have in the state related to teachers' contracts or state employees. So those are binding contractual obligations. You might want, and some of those, particularly in the teacher side, that's going to be a local conversation and a local budgeting issue.
But something's gotta be done. We can't afford to keep going on. You got to plan for your own future.
What was I gonna say?
She just stepped out for a second. Andrea Treadway, if we can move to something different, I have a question. I'm the vice chair of the Orwell Select Board, and I saw through Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns that there is a bill currently going through that may mandate hybrid meetings for municipalities for town meeting. And so my question is, if you can answer it, how would the state go about making sure every town is able to do it, and what would the requirement, I mean, what are the requirements? I just saw a quick blurb about it on Friday.
Well, so the Senator Hardy from our county chairs the Senate, excuse me, Government Operations Committee. And that's where there's currently discussion about how a town meeting would run, that hybrid obligation. My understanding is they're also talking about technical assistance to towns and things like that to make sure that it is available. And as I understand it, the thinking behind it is that when we had the COVID epidemic and we went remote for so many things, maybe the silver lining of that was that many people who might not drive to an event could then, get on their computer and participate remotely. And so I think the thinking is that they want to support town meetings as strongly as possible. So the more ways there are to participate in person or remote, then more people will be able to participate. And I think that's the thinking behind the bill. But the bill is, best I know, is not out yet. And it was, I just heard a brief presentation on it last week.
Thank
So,
you.
Senator Hardy, if you have more detailed questions or want to voice an opinion, I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you. It's always good to hear from someone on the front lines. She'd be the one on the Senate side to get in touch with.
I can give her a call.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is there another hand over here?
I had a hand just in regards to that comment.
Just state your name and.
My name is Paul Basin from Salisbury. In terms of what they're talking about, the possibilities of town meeting, I think it opens a can of worms with town meeting, because town meetings are falling apart now with getting attendance, and I think we need to encourage attendance at town meeting. I do think that, select board meetings, DRB meetings, all those types of things, having the ability to be on a Zoom or some remote, I think that's a great option, and I think that should be possibly mandated, that we have that ability for smaller meetings, but I don't feel good about it in terms of town. And my real reason for coming here was H706, which deals with neonicotinoids in corn seed for farmers, which has been outlawed in Quebec and outlawed in the state of New York. And there's been studies done that there's actually no difference in yield based on that, and there's also, keeping pesticides away is I think very important in light of what's happening in our world, and bees are hugely important to us, and hopefully both of you folks will vote for that bill.
Well, thanks. I spent 5 years in the Ag Committee, and starting in '07, and we started talking about neonics shortly after I came to the Ag Committee, so it's been a topic for a long time. The basic tension that I think has been that the treatments, neonicotinoids, that they can either be applied to a plant, but one way that's, someone here who's in the business should correct me in case I go off track a little, but there are, you can put them into the seeds and then the plant grows and it already has neonicotinoids in it. I don't know if they're GMO modified in order to create their own pesticides the way some GMO plants can. But the point was, as you're saying, that there's been a concern that they are damaging the health of bees, and then bees are the pollinators that are responsible for something like 35% of all food requires pollinators out there. For many years, the pushback that I heard from those using seeds with neonicotinoids was that they couldn't find a non-neonic replacement seed. And that held people, no one was going to say, well, you can't grow corn next year if you can't get seed, a neonicotinoid-free seed. But the request for that seed has been ongoing for a decade or more. And now there are, I think, more varieties, more plants available that aren't treated. And I would just agree that the fewer poisons we can put into the environment, for sure, the healthier for everything. Because these things also have a way of coming back around to us as well. And it's all one living ecosystem. And you can imagine, damaging any part of it is damaging for the whole system.
Thank you.
May I speak to that? I'm Jan Louise Ball, and that's what I was going to speak about and change the subject to. Thank you to whoever did. I've been a beekeeper for a big chunk of my life, 25, 30 years. And I've watched it go down. It's going down, it's going down, it's going down quick. I just saw two of my favorite beekeepers that it's their livelihood. And they're both saying they're about done, Jan Louise. And I got it many years ago, and the seed is not the answer. The seed is laced with it. If the wind is blowing and the harvest bees are out harvesting, they're hit. They don't make it back. Your colonies die. I've experienced it over and over and over. And if we don't do something, we won't have food. You say 35%, I say more. It's not just food, it's flowers, it's herbs, it's animals, it's everything. And if we don't clean up this planet now, we're dead real soon. I'm talking real soon. I'm not just making this up. I see things, I know things that are going on. And we are a done dog if we don't clean up the planet. We need to start thinking about teaching our kids how to plant a tree, how to grow a garden, how to be a real human instead of being somebody who goes to school and learns things that don't make any sense. They're on computers in kindergarten. Where does that money come from? All of it's screwed up. We're screwed up, and we're screwed up. We did it to ourselves, and we need to act now. We don't have a lot of time. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Koji tribe in Colombia. They are the oldest tribe on the planet, and they've been putting this out that we are done real soon because we've industrialized, we've separated ourselves, we've poisoned ourselves, and we've killed everything. We're killing everything around us. So I'm putting it out. We need to wake up now. Thank you. I appreciate you listening to me. I don't speak because it's foolishness. I speak because it's true. And you better start listening, and you better start acting, and we better start teaching our kids that it's not about learning reading, writing, and math. From here on out, it's about learning how to plant trees, grow gardens, do the things that kids need to be doing, because they don't need to be sitting in a classroom. This Orwell thing that my husband was talking about is thriving. They have a waiting list, and the kids are absolutely genius compared to the rest. Thank you.
Well, I just briefly chime in. I would say unfortunately, our species does not seem to be particularly good at looking at long-term impacts of decisions. So neonics, for instance, decrease the susceptibility of a plant to a bug. I don't know which particular pest it is that can get them, so it's understandable someone would want to have protect their harvest. But the problem is we don't necessarily look long-term and look at the subtle things that happen, as in where does that chemical, it may start in the plant, where does it go next? So you're talking about how there's drift, it ends up in bees, it's carried to other plants. I'll just say one quick thing. There is a federal program passed back when we did the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, all around 1970. It's the Toxic Substances Control Act. Those are toxic substances used in commerce and industry. The first thing that bill did was grandfather in 59,000 chemicals that were already in commerce. And since then, about 30,000 more chemicals have been introduced, so we're up to roughly 90,000 chemicals. And in that time, it's only prohibited the use of 6 chemicals. So that includes like DDT and hexavalent chromium. There are many other things we know now, for instance, that PFAS, the per and polyfluorinated alkanes that people are hearing about, or PCBs that we're finding in schools and elsewhere, or aromatic hydrocarbons that we find out of plastics that get into food. So we have, just to say it very plainly, we are poisoning ourselves and others through some of the choices we made in terms of how we run our businesses.
Any other comments on that subject?
Well, the only thing, it's great, that's, you're right about all that. But remember, the United States is feeding the world, a good portion of it. And that's done by all these things. Not everybody can have a garden in their backyard. But I mean, we put millions of tons of wheat and corn and soybeans for the rest of the world too to take care of them because they can't feed themselves. So there's 2 sides to every coin. We just have to, I don't know, is it good or bad? But again, these farms feed a lot of people. A lot of this milk goes into food. It's not just milk or cheese. The soybeans go into manufacturing, replacing petroleum products. So there's, we all got to think before we holler too loud. But I don't have the answer to it. Thank you.
We may be feeding a lot of the world, but the sad truth is that we're feeding poisons with the food that we send out. Almost every single grain of wheat, oats, grains are now desiccated with Roundup, glyphosate. We are eating glyphosate, and unless you can find a farmer who is growing without glyphosate, you are getting it in your food. And it is doing nasty things to us. Right now, the chronic disease rate for children is over 50% in this country. Why? It wasn't that way in the 50s and 60s when I was in school. Something has changed in the environment, and as we're dumping toxic chemicals all over the place, it has to stop. We in Vermont probably can't do very much about it because it's a federal issue. What we can do here, I don't know. We need to look at it and get out of the system that is doing this to us.
Paul Stone from Orwell. Peter, I was wondering if the $6.3 billion estimate for refurbishing schools, doing all the deferred maintenance, has there been any studies about the least cost way of doing that? In other words, refurbishing a building versus building a new one.
So as I said earlier, we did an assessment of all of our school buildings in Vermont that was just completed in October and showed that to basically take what we have and bring it up to code, make them, every school, safe, warm, and dry, would be about $6 billion. That's a sort of today figure. As you know, the cost of construction seems to go up by double digits weekly, so it's a real challenge. Looking at what the best route forward is has a lot to do with how do you also get community buy-in for the project. That's really probably one of the biggest things. So, if we keep chasing safe, warm, and dry as our goal, we're always going to be behind. We're never going to have those 21st century learning centers that we want. So, one thing that we're going to start wrestling with as we try to develop a program is the balance between doing projects that, that communities can get behind and can be proud of, versus simply taking a building and making it safe, warm, and dry, even if it, really no longer serves the needs of students the way we deal with education today. And as Chris was saying, we do so much more in schools now because of, frankly, a high level of increased student need, which I can't diagnose as to why. But the fact is schools play a role in that when a kid shows up there, they have to have that kid in and give the kid what he or she needs regardless. It's not like a mental health agency who can say, well, we're out of funding, we don't have enough people, we can't serve your need. School has really no choice. So that's a long answer to Paul to say. We're looking at various pathways forward and what are the best sort of levers to use. Safe, warm, and dry is a sort of a bare minimum, but it'd be nice that if we're going to invest this kind of money in our school buildings, that we do it in a way that advances education, addresses hopefully some of the high cost of education in Vermont, and can be buildings and facilities that communities can get behind and be proud of.
Andrea Treadway again. So when it comes to education, I was on the high school board years ago, and when we were looking at consolidating supervisory unions, and Orwell voted several times not to become part of the district. There was some incentives that were lost. Eventually, it was voted that we joined the Slate Valley Unified School District. I'm not seeing in those budgets the savings that were originally thought would happen by consolidating and, making potentially a principal be between two schools, getting rid of superintendents, consolidating that way. I haven't seen the savings when I'm looking at my school budget, and I also look at the next districts over, and I feel bad for anybody in the Middlebury district also. I agree, we need to be educating our children. We need to be doing way more than we are. And I think that when I was on the school board, I was told several times, well, the state mandates this, we really have no choice. We really have no control over our budget. We're basically given, this is what we have to do. I don't buy that. I look at things and I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be cost savings in here when I'm doing a budget. How are we going to fix the fact that the consolidating of those school districts hasn't really changed the overall cost of education?
So I can't speak specifically to Slate Valley.
Yeah.
However, we've certainly had the superintendent come in and speak to us a number of times over the years. And when we went through Act 46 and we unified school districts, I think all of them would report an initial cost savings. But of course, that's just a reset, and then that doesn't stop inflation, that doesn't stop increased student need, that doesn't stop a pandemic hitting. So those initial savings have probably, taken place, and then the costs continue to rise, and really they've been rising far greater than the rate of inflation, and a lot of that is based on student need. A lot of that is sort of the after effects of the pandemic. However, consolidation, you can't sort of prove a negative, but it has probably saved money in how school districts operate, in that they can be much more flexible with their staff, moving them among different buildings, otherwise known as different towns, which was not an ability that existed in previous years because every school was operated by its own school district. Those teachers worked for that particular school district. You couldn't just say, wow, we've got a greater need, down in, West Haven or whatever, we need to move one of the teachers from this area down there. So I think that there have been efficiencies. They've been certainly eclipsed by the cost of construction, the cost of transportation. Oh my God, we have those school districts that operate operate a bus system that is privately run and contracted. We've only had one bidder since I've ever been involved. So all the costs continue to rise despite the savings that we were able to achieve through consolidation.
Paul Stone again from Orwell. I was against consolidation and spoke against it, wrote against it. But after it happened, I changed my mind. And I think it's been a good thing for our school system to have the Slate Valley Union system in place. And one of the most significant things is that a lot of deferred maintenance has been taken care of. With the warm, safe, and dry as a minimum. For example, in the high school in Fairhaven, the floor in the cafeteria was so hot they had to put down rubber mats so the kids could walk on the floors. And it was because steam pipes were leaking, heating pipes were leaking underneath the floors, and nobody had done anything about it for years and years. When the consolidation finally came, these kinds of things were taken care of, and they're continuing to be taken care of, including here in the village school of Orwell. So there are benefits. I don't know if the costs have changed any or not, but there's certainly benefits to this consolidation.
I agree with that. I'm just worried about the savings.
Yeah, I just would just comment on that particular issue because we're dealing a lot of that with school construction. One of the things that unification of school districts allowed is creating positions that looked at the maintenance of an entire system rather than each school. What we really had, especially I'm up in the Middlebury area, our schools are so small that basically it's the principal who was in charge of washing the windows and unclogging the toilets. But really districts have now, because they're together, have been able to fund positions that are looking at the facilities of that whole system all the time. And it has allowed us to identify at least the problems and in some cases correct them, and allowed people who are supposed to be providing education and educational leaders time to do that work.
I'd also like to point out that our per pupil cost in Orwell is below the average. We're way down below state average. So we're doing a good job in that respect.
Yeah, congratulations.
Hi, Jan Louise again, and I'd like to open another can of worms, and this one's really big. We're poisoning our children. We're poisoning them with our food, with the Roundup that's on all the seeds. They spray it on all the wheat now before they harvest it, because then they can put in another crop sooner because it kills it. Unless you're buying organic, and you can't even be sure of that unless you check it out. And we're filling our children's bodies with toxins from the time they're born. We pump it into their bloodstream with these vaccines. I'm sorry, this is a big one, but it's a really big one. And we're poisoning our children. And they have, I don't know how many, 20, 30 before they even enter preschool. And all of them are poison for their bodies. It's the pharmaceuticals that are pushing this on us. They want to own the world, and they're doing a really good job because we're all sound asleep. We need to wake up. We need to realize that these children come perfect. I saw a mom in a store the other day, and she kept looking at her little baby in his seat. And she said, I'm really worried about him. He just got his first vaccine, and he's not looking very good. My heart just stopped because I know the difference. I have 4 children. I started them off on vaccines, and they started getting sick, and I realized it, and I said, no more. And you know what? We grew up with measles, mumps, and rubella. This is ridiculous. You can talk about polio, but that was already on its way out when we brought in the vaccines. Big Pharma owns us. Wake up. Spread the word.
I remember when polio was running wild in the United States. And I was worried sick. I'm 84 years old, so I remember this. And the polio vaccine
I'm
came along
86.
and it saved us. And these other vaccines are saving us. And you're wrong. I'm sorry, you're wrong. The science is against what you're saying.
John Baldy, just to set the record straight on the vaccines being safe. Every single one of the childhood diseases, measles, mumps, were on their way down because in the late 1800s and 1900s, we made the huge change to start sanitizing, get people out of these horrible conditions, living conditions improved. And if you look at the decrease in the mortality, it all happened before any of the vaccines were introduced. The mortality had dropped about 80–90%, about to where it is right now, long before the vaccines were introduced. The vaccines were introduced, and the pharmaceutical companies claimed that their vaccines had done this. That is an outright lie. You can check this out. You don't have to go very deep to check this out. The vaccine companies, as Jan Louise said, they're controlling us. They are an evil cartel. By the way, I'm 83, and I was around during the polio thing too, and I was scared to death when that first came in, but I didn't know the truth. And that's another one you need to look up.
Are there any more comments or questions or topics?
Chris,
Yes.
last year the clean heat bill was passed. What is the status of that?
Thank you, Paul, for asking. So people may remember, so it was called Clean Heat or Affordable Heat Act. The bill said, we think there's an opportunity to build a transition away from using fossil fuels to heat our homes. And the reasons for that were that we're exporting billions of dollars to buy in that energy. And there's a lot of emissions, greenhouse gases associated with it. So the idea was, is there a way to more economically heat, and is there a cleaner way to heat, and how would we raise the money in order to make that transition? So it's a big change, and what we passed last year has created positions over at the Public Utility Commission, 3 of them, that are developing a plan for how you would do such a thing, and also figuring out the costs of running it. Because you might remember last year there were some wild range of estimates as to what it would cost or save. And so those results will come back to us later in the year, beginning of next session, and it will be the next. You might also remember we built sort of a firewall. The Affordable Heat Act didn't just get passed, make a plan, and start. It had to make a plan, present it to the next legislature. The next legislature will evaluate it. If it looks like it's a cost-effective program, then we would have to vote to say, okay, now we want to implement. So it's a 2-step process. So that work is going on at the PUC right now all year. Also, Agency of Natural Resources has been doing some work. And then, interestingly, we just saw a report that A&R had produced for them by an outside vendor that's an energy expert. And it modeled what would happen if different ways of reducing emissions, what's the relative cost effectiveness of it. And when they costed out, so it's a first model, but a first glimpse. When they costed out Affordable Heat Act, they were estimating in the early years between 1.3 and 1.9 cents a gallon increased costs, and by like year 7 in the neighborhood of 7 cents. So you might remember last year a figure that traveled a lot was 71 cents a gallon is a increase in price. So happily, from my point of view, the first numbers we're seeing are much, excuse me, much more modest, and so I hope we'll have to vet all the information that comes to us, and then the next legislature will have to decide how, if and how to implement.
Any follow-up on the clean heat?
Well, I've got one. Now remember, this clean heat affects all you working people that gotta go to work every day, along with your taxes. You've gotta drive a car to work. So that comes right out of your income, of your net income. So think about that. That's costing a lot of Vermonters who are on the edge now. They're probably spending $100 a week to go to work. That's a lot of money in a year's time. I'm lucky, I don't have to go to work. I don't have to say this, but you're putting a lot of burden on our younger Vermonters for jobs and the work in this state, because this state doesn't provide very good paying jobs on the beginning of it. And the homes are being sold to out-of-staters. It's driving the cost of our value of our homes up. Our young people can't stay here anymore. They have to move on. You have no industrial, any work for, nobody ever talks about making new jobs in the whole state for anybody. Rutland lost 7 of them in my lifetime. Good paying jobs like GE, nobody cares. Well, you younger people are gonna have to start caring, because it's gonna affect you. Bob and I were safe, so is the next gentleman. He's retired now. But they better start listening and what and dang is going on. Because we're gonna be as poor as I was when I was raised in the 50s and the 60s. I have a lot more today. Families have a lot more. But we're starting to give this away. And you're gonna, years ago when I was a kid, your parents bought 1 car tire, not all 4. And I know all you remember that. Right, Paul? When you needed tires, you bought 1 tire, right? Got along with it. Is that true? And that's true. And today, they buy 4 new tires. I mean, I don't mean to act crazy or something, but we could go back to his age. I don't want to live like he did. No way. That wasn't good old times. Was it, Paul? They were hard times.
I don't think it's changed a lot.
Were there any other topics or comments? Do you wanna? Yep.
So, you were talking about, so just to be clear, clean heat is affecting heating fuels. It wouldn't affect transportation fuel, so the driving around. I appreciate that the cost of driving around has gotten pretty expensive. And actually, one of the reasons we're looking at in the Affordable Heat Act, like, where can that affordability come from? Well, some of it is that electricity is they're regulated utilities, unlike the oil companies where we see wild swings in prices. So in the 2 years that we were talking about and then passing the Affordable Heat Act, compared to prior winters, Vermonters spent about $700 million more in total because of the price spikes that we saw in heating fuels. And we don't get a vote as to whether or not Shell or ExxonMobil raises prices. It just happens, and we're stuck on the receiving end of that. So when we shift to the degree we can over time to electric vehicles and electric-based heat, because we're using utilities that are regulated, and generally the price of electricity is going up quite slowly, and it's a relatively steady line, so that it's much more plannable than the sort of roller coaster ride of fuel oil prices or for gas or heating. It creates a steadiness that is a lot more helpful to families, as well as, we can stand aside from all the pollution-related issues, which are important, but it's helpful to families to have a steadier budget, and electricity is a steadier resource that we manage in state. And then the last thing is we don't drill for any oil or gas here. It's not something you can buy from your neighbors. But we can make electricity in the state, either with wind and or solar. And that is, buying local has always been a good thing for us and for the economy. I've had more than one of Paul's turkeys over the years, and I'm happy every time I get one. I like to know that it's, raised right here.
Art, do you have a comment on the same topic?
No,
Okay.
so go ahead.
Bob Warren, on your saying about solar, when, because I have solar on my house. And Green Mountain Power, 8 years ago, sent out a letter saying they were gonna do away with, if you overproduce, do away with the credits. Well, Green Mountain Power doesn't own my system. So when the credits, if you don't use them up within a year, then you lose that money that they credited you to. And eventually that's all gonna be away, they're not gonna allow any more credits. So how can you say that solar is the way to go when our infrastructure is not even made for electric cars or buses or whatever? I mean, we have no place to charge them. And also you put the fire departments in big risks because of the lithium batteries.
You're right, there's challenges with changing any technology, from one to another. When cars started, late 19th century, there was a period of time where there were more electric vehicles than gas-powered vehicles. Gas-powered cars went out, that sort of, we, for the most part, forgot about electric vehicles. But we are building out a steady rate, more and more charging stations. Once upon a time when it was 1910, you were driving around in Vermont, I think in a car you might have carried fuel with you because you weren't so sure you were gonna find a gas station, but we built out gas stations. So I think the market will, over time, provide more places where you can charge more quickly and more easily and help people not worry that they're gonna run out of electricity while they're out driving. And then the mileage that you can get on electric vehicles going up, so it's helping more people feel like, oh, I could pull this off. My commute's 28 miles a day and my car can go 150, so if I get home and plug in at night, I'll be fine. The challenge now is, well, what if you need to make a trip to Boston? Well, you'll have to figure out where you're gonna charge along the way, maybe, things like that. But I think it gets easier with each passing year. On the lithium-ion battery stuff, that is true. We're having to figure out how to deal with it. They can catch fire. In fact, I'm working on a bill this year that we have programs in the state to help manage waste, like mercury and in light bulbs and in thermostats and waste paint and and household hazardous waste. Things from under your cleaning products from under your sink that we don't want going into a landfill and eventually could get into the groundwater, although we do line landfills. Anyway, we're adding on lithium-ion batteries this year because they weren't so common when we started the battery program. I think people probably know that you're not supposed to toss away batteries. You take them to your hardware store, drop them off, or give them to a transfer station. Because we don't want to put those materials, toxic materials, back into the land. We want to manage them safely. So it's a big transition. It's happening. There are about 11,000 electric vehicles in Vermont. 3 years ago, there were about 3,000. So you say, well, those are pretty small potatoes numbers, but it's growing pretty rapidly. And I think as more people get used to EVs, they find that they save quite a lot of money.
I understand that part.
Yep.
But the thing is, what are you gonna do for like Orwell, Shoreham, all these little towns with their fire departments? Are you gonna help them out when they have to go to one of these vehicle fires? Because them people are involved in hazardous waste and they couldn't happily breathe that stuff in, get themselves sick. So what are you gonna do?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's like a technical question. I used to be on fire and rescue, so I'm certainly interested and always have done things to support fire and rescue departments. So it's a good question. I'll inquire. I think probably this is a question nationally. There must be ways that people are approaching managing this risk in a way that protects firefighters. We've had different, when cars used to be full of plastics. Now the whole interior is pretty much plastic. So when that's on fire, there's some dangerous chemicals released from burning plastic.
Oh, yes, but even the firemen, their turnout gear is even hazardous. It's been proven that fire gear that we wear is hazardous to our health too, so.
Because of the materials in it.
Right.
Yeah. These are real challenges. We need to just do the best we can, figure them out. And I think, again, because it's a national issue, my hope is that some smart minds and good science are being applied to it and figure out how to manage it better.
I'm Mike Bertrand. Don't you think it would have been a good idea before you push any of these batteries? What are we gonna do with the waste?
Yeah.
That's a common sense thing. What do we do with the waste? You don't make something ahead of time that you have it's like nuclear waste.
Absolutely.
You've done the same thing with these car batteries. I love you, but I only got common sense, so that's it.
So there are ways to recycle batteries and reuse them actually. So for instance, in a car, you have a high demand on that battery. You want to charge it fully up and you want to get maximum mileage out of it. But just like your cell phone over time doesn't charge as fully or last as long, a battery in a car will eventually need replacement. But that battery still has plenty of useful life, so they're doing things like repurposing them. People may have heard about like Tesla Powerwalls, a big battery that sits down in your cellar and can charge and help you ride through a power outage. So there are these things can have second lives.
Again, I say, what do you do with the waste? It's gonna die.
Can I
It's
speak
gonna have to be
that?
taken care of.
May I speak to that? I also have a friend who has a electric car, and he just had it taken over by the mice. And I thank you for stopping them from killing the coyotes, by the way. I hope that goes through because they are our friend. We have to start thinking of the whole circle of life. Without them, we get run over with rodents. We are run over with mice right now, outside in the chickens. But I say that because his battery went dead because it was an electric car. And the mice got in there and raised their babies, and it was $12,000 to get a new battery. He can't afford that. I can't afford that. I can't afford that car to begin with. It's not fair to those of us who can't. And none of it is fair. You're telling us you're maybe going to take away fire too, wood stoves. How can you take away fire? The earth, the air, the fire, the water. It's all sacred. You can't take the circle of life away. It's here. It's always been here, and we need to start thinking outside the box and realize that battery that died, he's now got a car that's useless, and he doesn't know what to go to, back to another gas car. I don't know. We've let the mice go, so here we go. It's all out there, and we need to wake up. Just wake up and smell the flowers. Thank you.
We have about 2 minutes left of our program. Andrea?
First, I want to say thank you to the 2 legislators that showed up this morning. I realized that things were, I found out about this on Friday, so thank you for coming. I have one last thing. Have you seen the report from the to the legislature for EMS, which is talking about the ambulance deserts in the state, which are requiring longer response times? And I read through it quickly. It was sent to me by a friend. Orwell last year approached Middlebury Ambulance and said, hey, we realize that our firehouse potentially could house an ambulance for Middlebury to cut down on response times for Orwell, Whiting, Shoreham, and also help alleviate some of the lack of volunteerism because of all the requirements. Have you had a chance to look at those and look at that report?
No, so that's the short answer. So I appreciate that you're looking into it and bringing it to my attention. I'd be happy to look. Probably that report went into government operations.
Yeah, it went to, yeah, that was one of them.
Yeah, because when I served on that committee, we were always looking into 911, E911, Fire and Rescue Service, and it's been an ongoing challenge, just like there are fire departments that are largely voluntary, and as the training requirements go up, because you are exposed to things like burning plastics and lithium-ion batteries and all the rest of it. So there's more training required, and then it's harder to get people to make a commitment to a 136 or 160 hour course or whatever.
I was
Right,
just,
400 hours just to go on the rescue squad for become an EMT.
when I was an
That's
EMT,
crazy.
when I got up to my EMTI, I was at, it was a 160-hour course when I took it. And I started out with a 60-hour course and went all the way up through. And I did it for 18 years, and you know, it just gets to all the requirements, which are necessary to provide the care.
Right.
But we have no way to support our volunteers. New York State gives the towns the option of giving a 10% tax break to volunteers in town. I'm not saying that that's the answer, but I mean, when I took the firefighter course, it was 72 hours. It's now
204 hours.
Well, I was gonna say 204, 206. So, I mean, and we have families that, you know, used to say, you know, I'm gonna take this course, I'm gonna help. And I realize that, you know, there's less agriculture, there's less people around in town, but we have to figure a way to still provide the services. And as a town, we talked about this. I mean, we haven't gotten very far, but
Is Orwell served by Middlebury?
yes.
That's a long drive.
Yeah.
What's the response time like?
You know, when I was on rescue, the rescue squad had 20 members. They're down to like 6, and 3 of them are on Middlebury. So, you know, response time.
30 minutes.
So the quickest I've seen Middlebury get here in the last couple of years is 23 minutes, and I don't even want to know how fast they were going.
Do you have local first responders that can get to the scene
Yeah,
before
but
the ambulance
if
comes?
you only have
Like a jump bag or
Yeah.
something.
two or three people that are on the rescue squad,
Yeah.
and they're out of town, not working.
Yeah.
I mean, you're with 0, so then you rely on your next town up if they have any resources.
Oh, yeah, sure.
We had one in Shoreham, in town I live in, Shoreham.
Yeah.
We have one person that responds to every call that we have.
Yeah.
And that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year for nothing.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Vermont relies a tremendous amount on volunteers to pitch in. We could never afford, you know, like the option is professionalize and then have wages, and then there would be costs in town budgets, and so because we have limited resources, we say, well, let's see if we can do it through volunteerism, and we have, you know, if you look at a town, there are many people who volunteer, and I think we're lucky that it happened, but we don't always have complete service.
But the big thing, the state, instead of making these mandates, saying to get on a rescue squad or on a fire department, you gotta have this many hours. Go back to the basics. When I went on our rescue squad on the shore, there was advanced first aid. That way you could go to a scene and you could do this and that. Now you don't even have that anymore.
Actually, Bob, that you do.
Well, they do now.
They've reinstated, it's called the Vermont First Responder Course. It's a 20-hour course. And, you know, what I fell into when I was dealing with, as a select board member trying to do something here, is I had some pushback from some of the rescue squad on, well, they can't really do anything. But I think that 20-hour course,
Right.
I mean, you can make sure somebody's breathing, you can stop the bleed, you can do the important things.
Right, the important thing.
And I think that's how we can maybe get more volunteers in here, but I think that realistically, we're gonna have to look at outposts for ambulances.
But the
Thank
state's
you.
gotta stop
We-
mandating this, and this. Let the county deal with, okay, advanced first aid, or get people in the fire department, well, you can drive a truck, you can start a pumper, you know, all this other stuff is different. If you wanna go and be somebody else, then them classes are there for you.
So we are at time. We usually cut the program at 8:45, so we went a little bit longer today. We can stay here for a little while if you guys have casual conversation or questions that you guys want to mingle, but our official program is over as far as the moderating and stuff. And I would like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank both of you for being able to take the time out of your day to come. We know that this one was a very short notice as far as that goes, so we apologize for that, but thank you guys all for taking the time to come today. We do have the program for the next couple of breakfasts that we're going to be offering this year. So on February 26th, we'll be at the Bristol American Legion. March 11th, we'll be at the Virgins Parish Hall. March 25th at the Shoreham Congregational Church, and the last one will be April 8th in Weybridge at the Congregational Church. So we invite all of you to come and attend any of those that are convenient for you, and dive into some of these conversations a little bit more there if you want to. So thank you.
So
Can I
thank you.
say one more thing? Can they give Narcan?
Yep.
You people can now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.